Hello and welcome back to Sell Like You, the podcast that will open you up to the world of possibility, the world of sales. And today I'm joined by a wonderful guest, a friend and a fellow sales enthusiast. I actually knew Paul before I met him. And during my first couple of years in Perth working in IT sales, I'd heard so much about this guy and my clients were once his clients and so on. And if you know Perth, it's so small. And we were introduced, and as the rest they say is history. Paul is the sales enablement manager at consumer intelligence firm Talkwalker, and he's focused on driving effectiveness within the teams across Japan and Asia Pacific. He supports the team to realize their full potential whilst driving integrity-led sales with their clients at the core of everything they do. And today we're going to be diving into what we need to do to show up day to day for effective selling. And that's mindset, my absolute favorite topic, discovery, also known as qualification, and execution. But first, welcome Paul to the podcast. How are you this morning?
Hey, Harriet. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. How you doing?
Good. I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for coming on. Now we're going to kick off today and I'm going to ask you one of my favorite questions, which is your first objection or no that you witnessed in sales or experienced in sales.
Yeah, interesting. So first real rejection, an objection would be more of an internal one, really. I guess when I cast my mind back, it's good 20 years since I was a junior in sales, and we had an area manager or regional manager come to the office. I was actually working in a real estate firm. This is before I got into tech, and anyway, this guy came in, and the whole idea was to give a bit of a 360, as they called it, around performance and mindset of the people. And there's me as a young 20-something, and I thought I was doing okay. And he made a comment actually to my boss that then filtered down to me in a feedback review, and it sticks to me to this day. He said, "Look, I'm just not sure that Paul's dynamic enough for this kind of role." And anyone that knows me, that's probably not the first thing that they would say, and hopefully not at all. And for me, the reason why that's important is because I think within sales, we have to be motivated ourselves. We have to be intrinsically motivated in everything that we do. And that's what certainly stands out within, top performing reps. But for me, and I felt I did have that internal motivation at the time, but for someone to come to the area that doesn't really know me, hadn't spent any time, and make a comment like that, that was fire for me to even go the next stage, and really start ramping up my sales activity. He may have been right, of course. I'm always open to those comments, but obviously I didn't like it. But rather than be kind of negative about it, I had that in my mind every time things were tough, as they are frequently, as we know in sales. It's a challenging role. It just helped me to really re-energize and focus to say, stuff you, I'm not that guy. And it was just that extra motivation to go the extra mile. So, as salespeople, we get rejections all the time, objections, rejections, and we really, it comes back to that mindset and how that can work for us rather than against us, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And so interesting because, again, mindset's one of the topics we want to talk about today, but looking at either way that could have gone. You could have been like, this isn't for me, I'm out, I'm obviously not very good at this. Or it's that fire in the belly to be like, no, I'm 100%. Actually awesome at this and I'm going to show you why.
Yeah, and look, don't get me wrong, there was definitely a moment there, and I can remember this with clarity. We're talking over 20 years ago now, actually, and where that self-doubt creeps in, as it does with all of us. We're all humans, and I thought, well, crap, maybe he's right, maybe I'm not dynamic enough. But what I didn't really understand, there wasn't context to that, so it wasn't really objective feedback, so I didn't really know what to do with it other than do a bit of self-reflection and think well, maybe I am not dynamic enough, but then quickly move into, well, no, that's crap, I'm going to prove this guy wrong and everyone else wrong. And that was a better place to be, because I was more in control of the outcome, choosing to actually take that head on, as opposed to fall into that kind of almost victim mentality, I guess. So I look at it as a really positive thing.
Yeah, awesome. And I guess really back then, because in my experience early on in my sales career, there wasn't really conversations about mindset. It wasn't something that we really talked about. There was a bit of goal setting, and there was a bit of, you've got to feel confident about the call, and you've got to sound confident, and then they're going to believe you. But there was nothing, mindset wasn't really as big as it is today. Was that the same for you?
Yeah, I think so. There wasn't so much of that kind of psychological analysis. It was more about just real old school, hit the phones, it's a numbers game, and just show up. It's about being there at the right time. But there definitely wasn't, yeah, to your point, that emphasis around the detail of how we should be showing up for ourselves, and those other elements that we know are all part of our humanness that we need to bring forward to be the best version of us basically every day.
Yeah.
And that's
And so
changed a lot.
yeah, and so how do you find your mindset? How do you manage your mindset, or how does mindset play a part in your day to day now?
Yeah, great question. I think that it's something that's important for all of us, whatever we're doing. Obviously, my current role isn't in, straight at the coalface in an individual contributor role at the moment. Having done a lot of those roles in sales management, this is now about coaching the team. But still, whatever your role is, whatever your focus is, it's really important to just connect to yourself every day, isn't it? Just to understand, well, why am I doing this? What's my kind of sense of purpose? And it's just that short kind of reset almost in your mind that I go through probably a couple of times a day to think, well, what do I want to get out of this, and why? And I think that's the best thing. And I feel that when we talk about mindset more broadly, and as we said, all the rejections and objections that salespeople face, the top performing reps generally that I've come across are when times are getting tough, they actually kind of double down on the amount of work that they're doing and can really get back into, well, this is the reason that I'm showing up for myself every day. I'm not going to take this objection personally. It's part of the game, and we just push forward and we carry on. So mindset's critical in everything. To answer your question in short, with this role, it's not about me. So for the first time in my career, it's not about my individual number. It's about enabling growth in others, which is fantastic. So being that extra set of eyes and ears for the audience. So if I feel that things aren't going well, or a session maybe wasn't as effective as I'd liked it to be, I have to kind of check myself and go back to that mindset piece and go, hang on, who's it actually about? Just because I didn't think it was that effective, what does the audience think? Is there one or two practical things that they've taken away that they didn't know before? And just keep it real. The objective is to help these people get more effective 1% every interaction, rather than start to really move the dial hugely in one or two sessions. So yeah, that again, reconnecting to sense of purpose and what's actually realistic, and why we're doing it.
Yeah, and that's so great for you to say as well. It's because it's easy for us as successful salespeople to reflect on that and say, well, you've got it easy, you know what you're doing, and you've been doing it forever, and
Yeah.
therefore you just keep doing it. But mindset, again, as you said, plays that part every single day. And I think one of the biggest things that I find for my clients that I talk a lot about is about detaching from the outcome. And
100%.
again, and even yesterday I had a meeting with a client, and they've got one of their receptionists or like sales admins supporting the outbound effort, and the outbound effort is really just pre-qualification, and she's seen great success because she's not detached to the outcome, because this isn't her full-time role, this is her
Love it.
helping.
Love
And
it.
so she knows that if she gets a yes, she hands it over to the sales team. If she gets a no, she makes a note and she moves on. And
And
so
that's,
she's not
yeah,
detached, or sorry, she is detached from the outcome,
it
and
is
therefore is she's going in with more confidence. Her mindset is different. Whereas when the
100%.
sales team do it, they're thinking, I've got to be successful. I've got to get a yes, or I've got to move it forward. Otherwise Harriet's going to ask me what I've done. And so again, it's just looking at those different viewpoints, that going into that conversation with a slightly different viewpoint of, it doesn't matter if they say no, let's just gather some information, let's just try and build a little bit of rapport, so call
Yeah.
number 2 is easier in 3 months time, for example. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that you're still feeling that now. You're in that role where you're teaching others, you're seeing that, you're able to spot that, I would say, a lot easier.
Yeah, that's a massive point there. I think from a prospecting point of view, if we're just talking about cold calling specifically, it's a bit different with emails, because you are that extra layer detached. It's not your human voice talking to a stranger on the phone, and you can probably hide behind a knockback, or someone just doesn't reply to your email at all, and it's a lot easier to take. But yeah, it's huge. When you're living and breathing prospecting every day, it's so easy to become attached to the outcome and to look at yourself as, if I haven't got, you know, a couple of meetings off the back of the activities that I've been doing, I'm a failure, or the guy or girl that I've spoken to has given an objection, that I'm going to take that personally against me, you know, if they don't want to move forward. So I feel you're spot on. I think that the ability to detach from the outcome and treat it as literally, like I said earlier, it's the numbers game in the prospecting side of things, because let's face it, when we break it all down, the objective is get a meeting. You know, it's as simple as that. And then we start, and we'll talk about this obviously in the next part of the conversation, around the discovery meetings, which is the gold around, you know, building credibility, trust, all of those things. But before we even get there, it's about getting the meeting. So if we're in the mindset where, you know, it's going to ruin our day if someone hangs up on us, then, you know, that's not going to be too productive for anyone. And I've seen people like this who've literally told me that, you know, someone hangs up, that's going to ruin the rest of my day and going to be very, very difficult for me to pick up the phone again. So we need to really think about unraveling that, because it's easy to say, well, you shouldn't feel like that, but people do. So how do we address that? It's more about, you know, understanding the fact that if someone gives you you know, hangs up or tells you they're not interested, let's face it, we're a distraction for them. We've called them in the middle of the day, they've never heard from us before, and there's obviously techniques that we'd use to try and put them at ease, so they're not in that, you know, initial fight or flight response when they get a call and think, who the hell's this? But yeah, if people hang up, we need to be able to dust ourselves down and go again. Simple as that. It doesn't change anything. They don't know Harriet personally. They don't know Paul personally. So we need to look at it as it is literally just a numbers game when we're in that front end of prospecting at the beginning of the cycle.
Yeah, and again, one of the tactics I like to bring into businesses is looking at that email first, because again, it's that barrier. It's like, okay, here's 3 steps. The first step is really easy. You can hit send on that email, you can make it relevant, and from that you'll get 10 to 20% reply of yes, I'm interested, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
And then the other 80% are just sitting there because they're like, you've just sent an email, this is lazy, I'm not going to give you this yet, you've got to work for it.
Yeah.
So the second step then would then be following up with that email, you know, following up on another email of, did you get my email? What was the call to action? So is it a call? Is it a meeting? Is it an introduction? Are you asking for some information? And then that third point for me comes where the call comes in. And again, then it's that reframe of it's no longer a cold call. Because again, a lot of it is around, I don't want to cold calls, or cold calls don't work. And cold calls absolutely do work. There's a reason why there are thousands of call centers that are cold calling every single day around the world. But again, for those that are working at that softer approach or aiming, I would say, really for a more meaningful connection, again, not looking at that volume, and they're looking very specifically targeted. And then in that call, the mindset is more than, can we just check they got the email? Should we just make sure that email got through their spam filter and hit their inbox, and make sure it's in front of them? Because if it's relevant, they're going to want to read it. And so by doing that, we're doing a disservice by not following up and then just waiting. But again, the mindset kicks in and it's like, oh, well, they didn't reply, so they don't want it. So don't ring them. Why would you ring them? They don't want it. They didn't reply. But then when you then think about your own inbox, I've got 1,000 unread emails in my inbox, because to me, they're not important. The other ones that are unread are not important because they haven't come from someone I recognize, or they haven't got the heading that I'm expecting in my inbox. But, you know, if you put in there quote request, invite, you know, let's, you know, can we meet, or it's a discovery call, it's coming to my diary, absolutely, I'm going to open that. But again, it's just being mindful of how do we, you know, how is everyone else looking at their inbox, and getting in the way, like get in there and be like, hey, it's me again. Or a quick call. Hey, I know your inbox has probably got 1,000 emails just like mine. However, I thought I'd call you because what I'm calling about is relevant, and here's why.
Exactly right. I mean, 2 things that stand out from that is relevance, 100%, and that call to action at the end. But before we even get there, you know, as you said, whoever we're calling on has, you know, probably hundreds of emails a day. And on average, we know that even middle managers are receiving between 10 and 15 prospecting emails every day, certainly in this region. And so before they even open it, you know, it's about the tagline. So what's in it for them? How do you make it about them and not about you? You know, so many of them, you've probably received these emails as well, are about a kind of a sales pitch straight off the bat, where the company or individuals talking about them and their capabilities, and not making it about their audience. So yeah, number one is just standing out to to try and get someone to open that email in the first place. And then we know since the invention of these bad boys, the smartphones, people generally are opening their emails on a phone. So you need to then contextualize your message and keep it very, very short, because there's obviously only a certain amount of characters that people will scroll through before they get bored and just delete your message. So there's a few components there, but you're right, I guess to then be using, it's all about multi-channel, right? It's not just going to be one phone call. If it is great, a cold call meeting done, you're out of that first initial prospecting part, and you can go into then building value and leading with insights and building trust. But generally, yeah, it will be all of the above that you just mentioned, you know, emails, cold calls, and then following up on the emails. Like you said, it's a warmer introduction. But again, it's always about the customer. It's putting them first.
Yeah, and that's something, you know, that you're doing right now in your current role, is really focused on that customer at the core of everything you do. And that's something that I really champion, because again, sales gets such a bad rap because people think, oh, cold calling and pushy and sleazy, and they're selling me something that I don't really want. But one of the things you just mentioned there about, if you make that first call and somebody says, great, yep, let's have that meeting, there's a couple of things that have come into play there. They are either in pain about what it is that you've just called, and there's a really compelling reason, and it's topic, it's you know, it's on that to-do list for them. And so you've just come in, you've solved them a problem, and they're like, yes, I'm in. They may have heard of you recently, you may have connected with them on LinkedIn, there may be a little bit more to go with that. So again, there's reasons why people say yes on that initial call, and there's reasons why people don't. And so it's understanding that that's okay if somebody isn't ready, or if the cold call isn't the right avenue for them. There are other forms of communication.
Yeah, you know, I've met with a colleague, ex-colleague recently, actually, and he reminded me of something we used to do, which is so old school, but hear me out on this one. It actually it worked quite well, because when we were prospecting to CIOs and CFOs, you know, very time poor, all the things that we just said are barriers for them taking meetings. So one of the things we used to do is handwritten letters. And you might think, wow, that's going back to the dark ages. But the reason I feel that it was effective, not in all cases, but it definitely was an extra channel that we could use in our prospecting, was no one does it anymore. Like, no one does. Everyone's obviously on email. Everyone's been doing cold calling for ages. But to do a handwritten letter on your company letterhead, again, it's the same kind of basis as what you're doing on the rest of your prospecting. You're doing your research, you're making it about them, it's super relevant, there's a strong call to action, but there's also some kind of a reward as well that you could offer around, you know, sharing insights. We used to send it with books, for example, around something that we know was important for somebody in that role that would be interesting. And so you imagine you get that turning up at your desk, or reception gives it to you. It's something that's unique and a little bit different. We found that worked. So you're not going to do that every single time, obviously, but it's about mixing it up. And I thought that was quite good. He reminded me of that the other day. And it's just that extra avenue.
Yeah, because we would do that back in the UK when we were in the hosting space, is that we would be speaking to these large businesses, these CIOs, and they would be trying to make decisions on where are they going to be hosting that platform. And so you'd be building that rapport, and as part of that rapport building is standing out and being unique. And I remember being in Perth, one of the things I used to take was donuts to meetings. So
everyone loves donuts, right?
Oh, everyone loves donuts.
Can't go wrong.
Yeah. And I did get a reputation as the donut girl, and I was totally okay with that, because I'd rock up with these, you know, trays of Krispy Kremes, and everyone would remember who I was. So whether it was the CIO, because again, when we're talking about, you know, building that relationship and building that rapport, especially when you can get into that face-to-face level, it's making sure the receptionist knows who you are. It's making sure that the CIO and his team or her team knows who you are. So the CFO knows who you are, because they're going to be ones paying the invoice on time. So again, it's spreading that. And so if you can do that and spread a bit of joy at the same time, and maybe they might invite you to enjoy a donut also, which is also great.
Bonus. Yeah, exactly. But I think that's a good point. I think that a lot of when you get up to the C-level, obviously they have EAs or PAs. So knowing those guys and girls is super important, as well as other people, you know, within reception, because, you know, most of the EA's role is to try and manage the time of their executives who they're looking after, and to be a bit of a gatekeeper as well, and they're often really looped into the strategy and what these guys and girls are doing at a high level, so they can be a good source of information. You need these people to be your friends, right? It's about lobbying to build relationships throughout the company.
Yeah, definitely. Now let's jump into discovery. So I've been so excited to talk about this. When we spoke the other day, we were like, we're going to talk about these three things, and I was like, discovery, qualification, yes.
Yeah.
And the reason why I love this, because in my opinion, and I'll be interested to get yours, is that your sale or the opportunity will you can win or lose an opportunity based on this element, on discovery, on qualification.
100%. Yeah.
And so in your experience, where does qualification sit? Where does that discovery point sit? Do you feel like it happens once or multiple times?
Always. It starts really if you get the opportunity, even on the cold call. Whilst I've said it's about getting a meeting and use you a distraction, sometimes people will give you a bit more time on the phone even before committing to a meeting. So really, when I talk about discovery, it's about asking the right questions. So but you're going in there having hopefully done your research. So you're confirming some of the stuff that you already understand. So you're not starting from scratch. You're showing that you're earning some trust by doing your research. But the discovery process will typically happen in every interaction up to the point of when you're closing the sale and doing onboarding. Very rarely, it depends on the business that you're in, I guess, but I'm talking in the context of, I guess, SaaS sales, which we are in, obviously, at TalkWalker at the moment. Most customers are fairly well educated these days. The buying cycle's changed, so they do a lot of education themselves before that we even reach out to them, or before they may have made contact with us, but they'll only know a limited amount of information. So really, that discovery call is the most important one, to spend a lot of time in that before we're getting to into sales mode and pitching things and doing demos or solutions. That's the number one reason why deals stall, is where we don't do enough discovery and we assume that we've heard a problem or we've heard a challenge. We've talked about this briefly before, and it's really second nature for a lot of us. I'd still do it myself, to really just jump in and say, oh great, I've heard that this is a challenge for you, and then start to talk about how you can help solve that challenge before we actually know, is it a problem we need to solve, is it an urgent problem, what are the ramifications if they don't get this right, etc., etc., etc. So yeah, discovery, super important.
Yes. And with that discovery piece, again, it's getting them to sit, as you just mentioned, is not jumping in to solve their problem straight away, because we haven't uncovered enough at that point. Because I always explain it in the fact that someone's coming into that meeting or onto that call, and they have got information that they are prepared to share. They're ready. They know that you're going to be asking them a couple of questions. They're prepared to keep it fairly high level. They're going to let you in a little bit, and we need to dig deeper in that, because if we just scratch the surface, then we can only ever meet them at that scratch surface level based on what it is that they need or want or desire. And so when we go deeper, we're able to uncover the things that maybe they weren't expecting we were going to ask them, because they're used to the standard salesperson. And I do that in inverted commas as the standard salesperson. But with that space is that we have an opportunity to really understand them by asking open questions, by really uncovering their pain. Because if we can remind them of the pain in a nice way, we're not going to, we're not really going to get them to sit there and be like, and tell me, and how did you feel, and what happened, and then what were the ramifications from that, but more just really understanding, what is that pain point and why is it painful, and what could it look like what could that alternative look like, and then really understand anything else surrounding it. So we're looking at that core element. But what else is feeding into that? So with our business to business, it's always around what other projects is it feeding into? What's that budget coming from? Who else is going to be impacted by this? What other departments will be either involved or will need to be aware of this? And what other technologies is it feeding into? And then with our smaller businesses, it's what else is impacting? What are the potential road bumps in the way? So is it time? Is it money for investment? Is it ability to execute on something or lack of knowledge. And so when we really go deeper on that, we're able to then have a more meaningful conversation. But what you'll find is you've just gone 30 minutes and you've no idea where that time's gone, but you've just know everything about this person, right the way through to what dog have they got and what time of the day do they walk the dog. You know, that's really important as well, because that's your rapport building. Then when you do that at the beginning and then later on you go into more about you and your offerings and how it is you feel you could help, you've got so much more information to link that back to, rather than just kind of stabbing in the dark and hoping that what you're saying is relevant to them.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. It's spot on, and I think again it depends on the scenario and what you're selling. If it is more of a transactional type sale, or if it's, you know, hopefully even with transactional sales it's about relationships. As we know, we still need to build trust, but ultimately there would typically be, in my experience, several discovery calls. You know, like you said, half an hour, you can get a lot of information, but you won't get everything. And we know that, you know, there are generally more than one person involved in a decision, typically 4 or 5 people. There's influencers, champions, there's people behind the scenes that may be experiencing, you know, pain and involved in needing some kind of capability that you have to offer. So I think that it's got to be looked at as a you know, not just that one meeting, that one discovery meeting. You'll get a lot of information out of the individual, hopefully, which will give you that indication, but avoid the temptation to just start pitching. Now, having said that, that's a really delicate balance, because obviously clients are invested in a process with you as well, the prospects, and so at some point you've got to show them something. You don't want it to turn into just this arduous interview, and you know, it's like, God, how many more questions is Harriet going to ask me, and just show me what we've got. So there has to be that. What's that? Sorry.
And then off you go. Thanks so much for coming.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got everything I need.
We're done now, thanks. So it is that balance, and I think the other biggest thing with the discovery process is trying to make it feel that it's not just about us asking questions, it's about trying to deliver insights to them. So people, it comes down to, I think, you know, when we look at why deals stall or don't close at all, we've all been in that situation where we think that, you know, they've told us a lot of information, there's a problem that our solution can align to. You know, we've gone through a demo or shown them a, you know, a quote or proposal, whatever it may be, and then suddenly there's nothing. You know, the prospect ghosts you. Typically that happens for a few reasons, right? It's generally it's a nice to have rather than a must have. You know, there's not that, I guess, criticality to move forward, and so, you know, whilst people would like to see what you've got. I mean, my someone that I work with gave the analogy the other day, said that if someone rang me up and asked me to test drive one of the latest BMWs, I'd probably say yes, it'd be great to take it for a spin. You know, whether obviously it's not so good over in Sydney at the moment anyway, but you know, it's going to be a great way to spend a couple of hours. I'll take the thing for a test drive all day long. Did they ask me if I particularly wanted to buy it at the end of it, or if I was even in the market for a new car? No. So then the salesperson asked him after the fact that he's already taken the thing for a test drive, and he's like, well, had you asked me that up front, I wouldn't have agreed to do the test drive. So the point is, customers will often want to see a bit more and do their investigation, and it's easy for us as salespeople to go, right, that's an opportunity, I'm going to put that in the forecast, and they're never going to buy. So how can we kind of vaccinate against that up front in the discovery process, and that's where it comes down to helping customers join the dots between, you know, problems that they don't even realize that they have. That's where the art comes into it, and I think that's really, really powerful. And how do we do that? Often through storytelling. So for example, you know, you're in a discovery process with the customer and they're saying, oh yeah, you know, I've considered, you know, XYZ capability, we're not too sure, we're open to hearing what you've got to show us, you know. So again, it sounds very nice to have, there's no particular urgency there, but it's not on them to find that urgency, it's on us to try and show them why it's urgent. So it could be, you know, I was speaking to a client like you the other day, similar organization, similar industry type or similar roles, to make it super relatable. And you know, about a year ago, you know, they went through a similar process and were evaluating XYZ. You know, this was the problems that they had at the time. They weren't sure how to resolve them, and you know, wind the clock forward by 10 months, what they found they were able to do is, you know, and bring it back to a positive kind of solution mode. And as a result, that had a, you know, a 14% impact on their revenue, for example. So what's the kind of business outcome in doing that? Or you could do the reverse, which is obviously a bit more painful and causes a bit of anxiety of, you know, what do you stand to lose? You know, what's the ramification if you don't do this? You know, so trying to point out pitfalls for customers before they realize they're even in it themselves are some of the ways where we can start to drive some urgency to move people from a nice to have to must have, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's in that emotional element of knowing that that's the outcome of this is the journey of this is, oh yeah, I didn't actually realize I was here, and I didn't realize that not only could you solve this problem, but you can also solve this and this and this.
Yeah.
It's really interesting that, because once you've then got that in, is that you're having that conversation, you understand what it is they need, what it is they want, what it is that they desire, and then now you've given them some extra things to desire or want or need.
You're reframing their thinking a little bit, and what I feel it does as well is if you do it right, and you can you know, act as, you know, it's not about us, it was about this particular customer that we were dealing with, and they were the hero, they were the ones that really benefited from our partnership, as could you. It's about showing that you deal with people like them every day. So you know their typical role, their challenges, you've worked with their peers to outcomes on some of these problems. So by using that kind of talk track, it also helps build credibility, I think, as well.
Yeah, storytelling is a massive component in sales, because again, like you say, if it's just you and the other and the opportunity or the prospect or the client, is that it's only you saying I'm great, and here's why I'm great, and I'm going to tell you all the wonderful things about me and why I'm great and why this product is going to change your life. Whereas actually, if we then put it in the shoes of somebody else and we explain that story, although other client, you know, Sarah or John or Steve isn't in the room, we're giving that example of who it is, the fact that we understand their problem or their challenges. We've helped people in a similar situation, and they're like, oh, I'm not alone. Oh, there are other people out there that feel like I do or have this challenge, and you've solved that problem for them. So if you've solved the problem for them, surely you can do it for me. And then they start to connect the dots, because you're putting them there in the right format, the right process. Because again, if we started off with storytelling and then went into pitching and then went into discovery, none of it would make sense, because again, the story might not necessarily relate to their problems, the pitch may not necessarily relate to their outcomes, and then we're discovering, we're like, oh, by the way, we can also do this. Oh, and you just mentioned that we can still, we can absolutely do that as well. So again, it's coming back, but it's having the confidence to take them through a process that may not feel quite natural at the beginning, but doing it, trusting the process, and then seeing the results at the end and being like, I have to do that again because that was awesome. And that's genuinely what salespeople come out saying, because it does feel so good and they get the results.
It does, but it starts with practice, and you mentioned it there, building confidence, you know, doesn't just happen overnight. So how do people get confidence? I mean, I've heard and seen situations, you know, you're more confident if you've got a big pipeline, because you're not as kind of really focused on this deal has to close, otherwise I've got nothing else to back it up. So that's maybe one way if you've got a decent pipeline, but how do you build it in the first place? And how do you come to that meeting and show up for yourself with, you know, in the discovery meeting, whatever meeting is with the client, just knowing that you are their equal. It's not a subservient kind of relationship. This is a partnership, and we're here to build trust. And we're going to do that by showing you exactly what you just said through stories and bringing things to the fore around how we can help solve problems. So you're helping someone along the buying cycle, and you're not selling to them. But I feel that if you're not prepared and maybe not as experienced in doing that straight off the bat, it's not going to be easy. You know, it takes time, it takes repetition, like everything. But when you're there and you've done your research, you're armed with a couple of stories that you can tell, and you're ready to go there if you need to in that discussion, because you may be taken in a completely different direction. As we know, you can plan to the nth degree, and then suddenly a customer, you know, there might be other people in the room that you don't know, and it's just thrown your entire agenda out of the window, and you need to be able to dance around a bit and be comfortable with that. So I feel that through practice, you know, you get that confidence, which is the most important thing, I think, when delivering and holding your space in that discussion, because if you don't have it, as you said, often we see people use those filler words a lot, or they basically go back into pitching, because that's all. Then they go, crap, I didn't know, I wasn't ready for this one, where am I going to go now? So you start talking about capabilities and speeds and feeds and widgets and all the rest of it, and so it's completely kind of been detrimental to the whole purpose of the call.
Because they're comfortable at that point, because they're like, well, I know my product, I know my service, I know what I'm saying. And again, what can really throw people off, I think, in that element is, especially in tech, is, they say a word that you don't understand, or they talk about a project and you're like, I've never heard of this word. And then, and then they then get thrown off. Whereas actually what we need to do is own that element and be like, oh, what's that? Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because often it's a word that they're using that is the same thing as something we already know, but we just don't know the other word for it.
Different
Or when they
vernacular,
explain it, you're then like, tell me a bit more about that project. And again, we discover further. We're able to then, connect more of those dots. Is there something you're selling that will support that project or that integration or whatever it is? So,
and that's a common thing as well that I hear, is that, definitely in the tech world, but generally, if a salesperson is on a call and they get a direct question or a statement comes up to them about a thing, and they're not sure what it is, there is often a situation where that individual gets flustered because they're trying to answer something. They've got no idea what the customer's talking about. And so my advice is straight off the bat, and I'm sure you'll be the same, is you don't have to. You're not the expert on everything. Don't put yourself through that world of pain trying to be the expert. Just simply be real with them and say, I don't know what you're talking about. Can you help me understand what that is? And but more to the point, why? So it's about, when people are coming to us with we want to know about XYZ. Well, what's the reason for that? What's behind that? There's always a question behind the question. What kind of business problem are you hoping to solve by that? What are you hoping to do tomorrow that you can't do today? But yeah, I don't have a clue what you just said that thing was, but I'll make a note of it. And if I understand why you're asking it, I will find out and I will come back to you, rather than having to scramble around and just look stupid.
And you just built so much more trust then, because then they know that anything moving forward, if you don't know it, you're going to own up to it. If you're not sure, if something's not quite gone to plan, you're going to own up to it and be like, hey, we tried this, didn't work. We're going to try something else, but just bear with me. You're going to start building that trust, rather than, like you said, pretending like you know, because they will know that you don't know.
Smell it a mile away.
And so moving through into execution. So execution is about taking action, but it's more than just taking action. And so to you, what does execution look like in your teams right now?
So I think there's a number of aspects, right? So it comes down to, when we look broadly, execution is about, getting the job done. But it's, like I said, it's much more than that. So it starts with, you can have a plan of, how you want to go to market and what your prospecting campaigns are going to be. You can have the right mindset. You can turn up like really attached to your kind of sense of purpose, how you want to show up for yourself. But if you don't get started, it's just a plan. It might as well just be writing on a whiteboard, or something laminated on a wall that just sticks there forever. So really, execution is about, to me, it's about just getting started. So many times we hear, especially when people have got yearly targets, a big number to achieve. It's like, I've got this 6-figure number that I need to achieve by the end of the year, and they get overwhelmed by the size of the mountain, if that makes sense. So rather than that, let's just break that down into, it sounds very kind of simple to understand, but a lot of people don't do this in my experience. Let's break that 6-figure number down, 7-figure number down, to say, well, what do we need to do each month, each week, each day, and what are the individual activities that I need to undertake to actually start chipping away at that number. So whilst that's not full execution, it starts there. So then it's kind of, how do you manage your time as a salesperson? There's a 1,000 things that we could be doing. We're all busy. Easy to get distracted these days when you've got various socials, you've got your messaging internally as well, and loads of stuff is just a noise. So it's about mapping out what are the specific things that I need to do from a prospecting perspective every single day, and committing to that, putting it in the diary, getting ideally a week, 2 weeks ahead in your diary to commit to yourself, not in one large chunk. On Thursday, I'm just going to be prospecting for 4 hours. Well, great. What are you going to do the rest of the days? It's about, I feel, the frequency. So you can really build that muscle memory, really get into the flow of every day I'm going to be prospecting. And yeah, sure, I'm going to need time to do my admin, do my quotes, do my follow-ups, do my expenses, blah, 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 blah. Great. But if you do all those things and never start prospecting, you're going to be at the end of the year with donuts, to bring it back to that, on the target, and big zeros against your number. So really, execution is about managing your time, your energy, your focus, and just getting started on the things that are going to make the biggest difference.
Yeah, and the things that are going to make the biggest difference, because it is about, we can get stuck in that ticking boxes and being like, well, I did, but I sent out five emails, and I did do those follow-up calls, and I did do that. But did you actually go after the people that you really want to work with? Did you make the effort? Did you approach them in a way that is going to generate results? Because again, as salespeople, we're quite protective, or I've seen it across the years that I, in myself, but now in my clients, is that we can be quite protective of, well, if we don't try, we can't fail.
Yeah.
And if we show up and we have a go and we get really clear on what it is that we're doing, because again, your pipeline growth is important. But if you stop selling because you're busy, and again, inverted commas, busy, because we're all busy, but we can all make time to send 5 emails, to call 5 people, that's an extra few minutes at the end of your day, or in between your day. You can absolutely find that time, but that's going to impact you in 2, 3, 4 weeks time. So you might be having an awesome month, and you're like, I'm tracking along and I'm getting these consistent sales and they're all coming through. You get to the end of the month, and then you look into, right now we're in June, we look into July, and you're like, I've got nothing. And that's because we haven't done that consistency. We haven't had that frequency, as you mentioned, of those reach out and of those generating opportunities and doing things that are going to bring you those results.
Yeah, and it's exactly right. It's about committing to yourself up front and actually doing the work. An old leader of mine used to say, you do the right things, great things will follow. It might take time. It won't necessarily happen overnight, but you need to understand what those right things are to build your business. We've always, salespeople, it's our own little franchise within the respective businesses that we work in. So we need to know what are the right things. We'll break it down into all the prospecting elements that you just mentioned before. But don't be that person at the middle of the year that's like, suddenly I wish I'd done more of X, or I wish I'd put more focus in Y. It's a bit like we were at a theme park with my daughters a few months ago. I don't know whether I've told you the story, but my youngest is not that young anymore. She's just about to hit 13. And anyway, there was one ride at this park which is basically really high up, and basically the floor drops out, and you have you fall vertically at pace, and then it takes you up for a shoot at the other end. This is at Adventure World in the Gold Coast, and awful, absolutely awful. But the kids were all there ready, and my youngest, we got to the top, so there's a big queue, so a lot of time to ponder this, and really mull it over. It really affects the mindset, and I could tell she was nervous, and like, she never wants to hold my hand anymore, obviously, because she's too cool for that as a kid. But she did. She reached out to her. I'm like, oh, hang on, are you okay? So we got to the top, and so I had to do this big. She was like, oh, I'm not sure I want to do it, Dad. I'm like, I said, well, you've just queued up for the last hour, and you said you were pretty keen on it. She said, I know, but it's so scary looking at it. I said, yeah, it is, 100%. And so what do you want to do? Go back down again? She's like, oh, I don't really want to go back down either. And the whole queue's like building up behind us. I'm thinking, okay, well, we need to make a decision. We let a couple of people go in front. She's still kind of hesitant about it. And so I thought, we're here for a reason. Again, this is how she wanted to show up for herself, was do this right, because it was important to her, even though she's scared. I said, well, how do you want to feel when you get home at the end of the day? We're going to have an awesome day. Go out, have some food, and you'll be tired when you go to bed. Think about how you want to feel when you've done this ride. Do you want to be in bed going, yeah, I just did it, and even once, and I'm so proud of myself for doing that? Or do you want to be the person that sits there or lies in bed going, well, I wish I tried it, but I didn't, and now it's going to be another year or 6 months until we go again, and regret that. And I kind of think, we went through that conversation. She got on the ride, she did it. She was pumped, obviously, the adrenaline, and then I realized I was standing up the top, and I was like, shit, now I've got to do it myself. and so I just tried not to think about it too much and did it. But the point with that is, it's the same for our sellers. I think that you don't want to be wondering at the end of the year or whenever your target period is, what if I wish I'd done this, and because there's two finites. You've got a number to hit, and you've got an amount of time in which to hit that number, and that clock's ticking all the time. So they're the things that are in our control. We can't control everything, but this execution piece is so critical. Otherwise it's just a plan and it goes nowhere.
Exactly. I'm so glad, like that piece there about, are you going to look back and regret, or are you going to look back and wish, or know that you could have done more? And so breaking that down. So again, if we look at the execution of how you're breaking that execution down, break down the reflection as well. So, even get into that weekly reflection of how did your week go? Did you do everything that you were meant to do that's going to generate the opportunities, that's going to generate you that revenue, that's going to help you keep moving forward? Did you build those relationships? Did you show up to those meetings in the best way possible and move through? Again, notice we haven't talked about anything to do with outcome. We haven't talked about, did you close this many sales? Did you generate this much revenue? We're talking about, did you show up? Did you do your best towards your target, either for your business or for your sales pipeline? And if not, that's okay. It was only 5 days. How do we move on next week? How can we show up on Monday?
Exactly. Yeah.
Be better and do more that week? And every time, I talk about doing more, and people, I think, freak out to think I'm talking about doing more hours. And that's certainly not it. It's about just doing more in the hours that you've got, in the activity you're doing.
It's being effective, exactly. So I kind of look at it as kind of like 5 stages. So it's prioritization is the key. As I just said earlier, we've got that finite amount of time to hit our number. There's loads of stuff we could be doing, but what are the activities we need to do to actually move the dial on? So focusing on those big rocks first. I feel, for me in particular, for most people, multitasking doesn't work. I think actually neurologically it's proven we can't actually do 2 things properly at once. So blocking that time out in your diary, turning off your notifications, giving yourself, the right opportunity to be successful with these tasks. We need to own it, and we need to have a good relationship with them, because we're going to be doing them every day, totally. So not allowing yourself to get distracted. So I know if I get a message that comes in, I'll look at the phone and see whatever the update is, and then it takes me another 2 or 3 minutes to refocus, and so that's hard. And the other thing that, so we talked about the frequency, doing it regularly rather than, just in one big chunk. So we removed the friction points, but then also some people, myself included, has been guilty of this on numerous occasions. You get caught in the planning phase. We want to do research on our clients. We want to show that we understand their world, but sometimes we overplan and don't get started. Yes. So how much is enough to just go, okay, well, now I'm just going to own it and get started. Don't get caught in the planning phase, because again, suddenly it's 4:30 and you've lost a day. You might have loads of good plans, but you haven't started
and
doing
now you can't execute those till tomorrow. And the same thing with that is that procrastination of putting off. So if I plan, and I really want to plan, I really want to make sure I've got everything nailed, because again, I always recommend kind of looking only for 2 or 3 minutes, looking especially for that in that initial connection point, that initial reach out, that initial, if you are cold calling, if you are doing that follow-up, all we need to really know is a couple of pieces of information about them. And then we can move on, because if we understand way too much, we don't ask enough questions, because we assume a lot of information that we Googled. And then you've got the other side that you spend so long. What happens if they don't answer the phone?
Yeah.
And tomorrow you have to do it all again, because again, you're not writing it down, because you're not being that effective. You're searching it, you're moving on, and then you come back to it and you do the exact same thing tomorrow. So there's a whole chunk of time gone.
Exactly. That's so good. And I think actually making assumptions, although we've heard, that it's not a great thing to make assumptions, but if you frame it in the right way to clients, like you say, you do enough research to sound that at least, you understand a little bit about their role. But again, you can frame it in a way that makes them feel like you've done some research, more research than you have, or that you know about their role. So for example, new CIO, we'll keep it in the tech world for a sec, where we understand that, in your role, you're new to the organization. A large chunk of your time is going to be taken up around understanding the strategy and how that then can flow down to the technology strategy, learning about your people, learning about the risk points. They're all assumptions that we make, which are probably true, because our gut usually is pretty right about this stuff if we understand the roles. And then we'll say, that is that the case? Is there anything else more important for you at the moment? And that's not something that takes a lot of research to do. It's just putting your mind into their role and trying to show them that you know them a little bit.
Yeah, and again, if you're working smarter and you're building up that focus, replication of ideal clients, those focus opportunities, is that generally if we start and we focus in a vertical where that we understand that we're quite comfortable in. For example, again, if we leave it in tech world, is if we're focusing, say, on local government, and we sit within local government, we can approach and connect with all the local governments in your state, in your country, and have those conversations, and you're going to be really comfortable sitting in that. There's only going to be a few variables if we're staying in a certain industry. Would you agree?
100%. I spoke to a good old friend of mine who looks after the education, so higher ed, so universities basically in Western Australia at the moment, earlier this week, and he was sharing that exactly that point. If you know high level, what's the business objectives and outcomes that these folk are looking for when a university, it's about how they retain existing students and how they attract new students from the international student market and other areas. So again, it's like any other business, it comes back to growth and revenue. Any commercial business from a government point of view, it's quite easy to think it's about citizen experience, for example, is the broad brush thing, and then there's programs of work and initiatives that they're all working on underneath that, but they all feed back into the same objective. So within higher ed, knowing that it's about that student experience, and retention and growth of new students, you can take that cookie cutter approach, at least into your initial discovery meetings, to show that you know what's important to them, but then you start to use your questioning to drill deeper into what are the specific priorities that feed into that those individuals are tasked to be successful with. But yeah, it's easy to just do that industry background first, and that can apply to high level to most of the clients.
So much, yeah. Now, you were recently in Japan, obviously great to be able to travel internationally again, and you were training your teams over there. What was the biggest breakthrough, or what was the main topic that kept coming up, just to kind of keep it relevant into what's happening, currently?
Yeah, so biggest breakthrough, so I'll take that in two pieces. Biggest breakthrough was really trying to get the guard down. So some cultural aspects throughout Asia, and there's a lot of the kind of saving face, and people don't want to necessarily show vulnerabilities, and that's same everywhere, right? Just to varying degrees. So going into to speak with a bunch of really clever, experienced salespeople, but I don't know them, I haven't built that relationship. So I think it was really important to set the tone right from the get-go, that not only have I done their role and understand the challenges that they're facing, I've also done it really, really badly over the years at times as well, and that's okay. So it's kind of leading with showing some vulnerability. And the reason I think that's important is because if I can't show that, then how can I expect them to? And if they don't show vulnerability, and they're all just kind of not, and this isn't just Japan, by the way, it's generally speaking, as you'll find with coaching as well, right? And you're just getting lots of nodded heads saying, yeah, I understand, and this is great. What do they really feel? People need to feel safe to there isn't really a mistake. We're all here to just try and get that 1% better every day. So by showing that vulnerability helped, I think, from the start with these people, because the team are amazing anyway, but they felt more comfortable to share some of their perceived weaknesses, some of their challenges in the field, so that we could actually be more practical in working through some of those challenges as a group, knowing that the answers don't all come from me. They've got most of the answers themselves already. It's just helping them find the answers themselves, and join the dots between it. So that was big. And I think generally in any coaching exercise, it has to be that kind of process of if you ask someone straight off the bat, like even with your customers, what's the most important thing to you or what drives you, they're going to tell you what they think that you want to hear. So you need to earn the right, I think, to have that conversation, and by showing that vulnerability helps. So that was number one. And some of the biggest challenges that they have is more working for, it's more of a regional versus global thing. What works maybe in the US and Europe doesn't necessarily compute or work in reality in Japan. We all have these local nuances, same in Australia, same in Singapore. Everyone's slightly different in how they do things. So it's being able to take all these global best practices and say, okay, great, but how do we actually apply them to our audience here in a way that's meaningful and actually makes sense to them? The other main challenge they've got is they're still really in the throes of COVID, so people are still not going back to work. They've started to come back into the office now as things are opening up a bit, but from a prospecting perspective, people don't share their details as much over LinkedIn, for example, over there. So it's hard to actually get to decision makers. So they were having more sharing that there was more success around emails than cold calls, for example. And so that's great. I'm saying, well, that don't stop the emails, and if it's working, awesome. But we need to be doing both, ideally, right? So how can we be effective at doing that? In the constraints of their marketplace, basically.
Yeah, and again, it's finding what's working. So, a lot of those elements when we're talking about email and LinkedIn and phone is work out what's going to work for your clients or for the specific industry that you're targeting, or the specific location of where your ideal clients are.
Yeah.
And then drive that, and don't neglect everything else, but drive that, harder, and then look at how the other elements of communication could complement that effort.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly right. If you look at the most successful and effective salespeople, they found something that works for them. They found a secret sauce or a problem that is a method that works for them. They've taken on, but they're always open for learning and curious about doing things in different ways, but they've found something, and they will literally just replicate it time after time with some personalization, don't get me wrong, but not over engineering things. It's like, well, if this and this works, that's what I'm going to do, and just keep it simple.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. And so if somebody's listening today, and we've talked about lots, and obviously we're very excited about talking about sales, and I think this conversation, I'm sure we'll be having more of these, but this conversation certainly go on for hours, especially if people knew how long we talk offline, Paul.
Yeah, exactly.
They would certainly know how long this could go for. But if somebody's listening to this and they've, there's lots of things we've talked about, what would you say if there was one thing they could start doing, or that they should be thinking about based on what we've talked just about today? What do you think that would be?
Really connect with your why you're doing this in the first place, because if you can't bring your whole self forward in a professional capacity, you're only going to get the same level of results in terms of output. So even when even more so when the times are tough, you might be getting a lot of rejections, there's not much going on. Just really think about why you're doing it in the first place, why you chose. I've heard you say this as well, Harry. No one kind of, if you think back to when you were a child, very few, if any, I'm sure, were, when asked by their parents or their teachers, what do you want to do when you grow up, say, oh, I want to be in sales. Highly unlikely. I'd love to meet someone that did. But anyway, we're all here now for a reason, whether we chose to be, whether it's planned, whatever it is. So we spend a lot of time at work. We need to have fun with it, but we need to know that we can bring our whole self forward and not be intimidated by things, not feel that we're not good enough, because none of us are. None of us are the finished article. So how can we be the best that we can be every day? Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. And again, coming back to the fact that whatever you do in your life, in your business, in your career, you become a specialist in that element, whatever that is. Whether you chose that, you become that specialist, and to own that, and to connect that to the why, to the purpose, to what gets you up every day. is
Yeah.
really important, but also knowing that there are days that we don't want to do something. There are days where we
Yeah.
question. There are days where we have to reset, and that's totally okay. But knowing that you can reset on a Wednesday at 3 p.m. and still have a great week, because
That's so true.
it doesn't just end there. It doesn't just have to end. It's not like, you have to wait till Friday and then we have to start again Monday. You can start again at any point. You can reset at any point. You can make your week more impactful at any point.
Do you know what? That's the other big thing, is that if you're not feeling the juju that day and you haven't got your mojo or whatever you want to call it, you need to be able to reflect on that and say, is this the best time to actually be doing this particular activity as well? Because remember, if we're doing it frequently, you've got 4 other days that week that you're going to commit to. There's so many layers and elements of us as humans that we need to also be kind to ourselves, because sales is we've heard all the sporting comparisons, champions no finish line and things like that, but champions have an off season. Look at professional sports, they have a break. And often we don't as salespeople, right? So the majority of people that I've spoken to that have got deals that they've been chasing, whether it's short cycles or longer sales cycles, when the deal actually comes in, it's how did you feel? And most of the time the responses are just relief. I'm relieved that we got it over the line, and then we move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of that excitement, a lot of that endorphin releases through the thrill of the chase of actually getting the client across the line in the first place. Once you've got it, but then you have to pick yourself up and go again and again and again. So it's really important to build in that time for yourself or whatever you're doing to make sure that you can recharge the batteries. Otherwise you will burn out, and we've all been there before, right? So
yes, yeah, and I find, again, exactly for that, if I'll notice, I'll start clicking through different tabs, and then I'll look at my list 4 times, and then I'll be like, I'm not, over the last 30 minutes I've done nothing.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna sign off. I'm gonna go for a walk. I'm gonna have a cup, for me, I'm gonna have a cup of tea.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do the yoga. I'm gonna go to the gym. I'm gonna do something to change my state, and then I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna try again.
Whatever you're thinking.
At that point, you're good to go. I'm going to stand up on my stand-up desk now because I'm all fancy.
Awesome.
Or I'm going to sit down, or I'm going to go and sit in the kitchen rather than in my office. I'm going to sit in the dining table instead of in here. So again, it's just changing that state.
Might be take your dressing gown off and just put some work clothes on. But it could be
that can also help.
Get dressed. Yeah, and that's the other thing, right? Working from home is that different environment, and so it's kind of, I've talked to many people over the last couple of weeks that are now getting back into the office and just loving the vibe of just being kind of face to face, whether their commute is on the train or driving in, and just doing coffee meetings and getting ready for the simple things of signing in reception and getting ready to do presentations. It's just such a different dynamic. It's so refreshing to get that back again.
Yes. Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm going to close us out with a rapid fire questions.
All right.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, I've thrown this on you, Paul.
All right.
Okay. Would you guaranteed $1 million or flip a coin for $1 billion?
Oh, flip a coin.
Okay. Oh, interesting. What sale did you have to work the hardest for, and why?
The hardest was probably a situation with a customer where the sales cycle was about 14 months all up, and the reason for that is that a lot of the stakeholders left halfway through the sales process, so we had to kind of reset, start again. Everything that we had was really pertinent and tied to business outcomes, so they were still relevant, but the individual stakeholders, we had to basically start those discovery meetings again, and so it took time, and it was building consensus between people. So yeah, it was very painful, but more rewarding in the end, because it's one of those that we worked on for so long. It felt pretty good, but again, relief, and then move on.
At the end, you're like, it's done, it's off my plate. Okay,
pretty much,
awesome. Yeah. And finally, what word comes up for you when I say sales?
Opportunity.
I knew you were going to give me a good answer for that one.
Yeah.
Awesome. I absolutely love it. Thank you so much for being on today's podcast episode. We have covered so much, and I look forward, hopefully we can have more of these chats, because I think there's so much more we can unpick together.
For hours. Yeah, it's good.
Definitely. Yes,
thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks for being here. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Cheers. You take care. All the best. Thanks, Harriet.